My name is Rachel and you're watching the Rachelistic channel. If you have ADHD and you watch a lot of videos about ADHD, then you might have heard about something called Object Permanence. You've probably heard that ADHDers struggle with object permanence, and that's why we're forgetting about the food in our fridge or the things that we have in our cabinets. Well, I'm here to tell you that that is false information. You, in fact, do not have object permanence issues. So just keep watching if you want to know what the real problem is. So in order for you to understand why you are not struggling with object permanence, or object constancy for that matter, you first need to understand what they are. So what is object permanence? Object permanence is a developmental milestone when an infant learns that an object still exists even when it's hidden or out of sight. It's typically achieved by 9 to 12 months old. So if you haven't achieved this developmental milestone, you don't understand that objects still exist even when they are out of sight. So this is why babies love playing peekaboo, especially before they've developed this milestone, because they literally think that you're like disappearing and reappearing like right in front of your face or in front of their face. It's like a really cool magic trick for them because they don't understand yet that you're still there even though they can't see your face. So the thing about object permanence, or the lack of it, is that it sounds quite similar to how ADHDers forget about things that they don't see all the time. Like how we might forget that we bought strawberries and they're in the fridge and then they go bad because they're in the fridge and we're not seeing them because they're in the fridge. Yeah. Anyways, because it seems very similar to like a lack of object permanence, I can understand how someone might have read about object permanence and incorrectly assume that ADHDers are struggling with this. What I think happened is that someone replaced a word with another word that didn't mean the same thing. So if someone has object permanence issues, that means that they don't know that something still exists or is still there, even if they can't see it or it's hidden. Like, they literally don't know that it's still there even if it's hidden, you know? But the confusion comes in when you replace don't know with forget. So it becomes they forget that something exists or is still there even if it's hidden or out of sight. So to forget and to not know don't mean the same thing. You can't forget something that you don't know. So, for example, with the strawberries in the fridge example, if I actually had object permanence issues, once I put those strawberries in the fridge, I wouldn't know that they're in the fridge, if that makes sense. Because I can't see them, in my head, the strawberries do not exist. They're not there anymore. They're not in the fridge. They're just, I don't know, they're not there anymore. It's different from buying strawberries, putting them in the fridge, and forgetting about them in the fridge. Yeah, it's not the same. Another example, so say you see this nice little stingray plushie. Yes, okay? So, if I take this plushie and I put it behind me, if you wholeheartedly believe without a shadow of a doubt that this plushie that I had and I put behind me is no longer here, it doesn't exist anymore because you can't see it, then you probably have object permanence issues and you should probably go see a psychologist or doctor or someone at your earliest convenience. Not to be funny, but being 100% serious, you very much so should do that if you believe that the plushie is no longer here. But if you do know that the plushie is still just right here behind me, then you don't have object permanence issues. you might forget if, say, I left it behind me for the entirety of this video and you forgot by the end that it was there. That's different than having object permanence issues and not knowing that it still exists once you don't see it, you know? So just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, if you forget about things that you don't see, that is not object permanence issues. Object permanence issues is if you literally do not know that things still exist when you don't see them. So now that you know about object permanence and what a lack of object permanence actually looks like, we can move on to object constancy. So what is object constancy? So object constancy is the ability to maintain a positive emotional bond with someone even when distance and conflict intrude. What this means is that even if someone is far away or they don't really visit you or like hang out with you that much, that doesn't mean like you would understand that they're not like abandoning you, or like even if you have like an argument with someone or you know you have some conflicts, like you can still see them in a positive light and kind of still have a positive relationship with them even if you get into disagreements maybe sometimes. Another way to say that is that you understand that distance doesn't mean abandonment, and that you don't need to see, touch, or sense someone to feel supported by them. So it's a cognitive skill that typically develops between 2 and 3 years of age, but I think it also depends on like if you have a secure attachment style with your parents and caregivers and stuff like that. So object constancy is really about how you relate to people and like the people that you have a relationship with. So if you have a lack of object constancy or you struggle with object constancy, then you would have difficulty maintaining a positive bond with other people. So for example, if you have a disagreement with your friend, you would see them as like your enemy who's like out to get you, instead of continuing to see them as your friend that you've had an argument with, you know? Like you can't, like if you have object constancy issues, then you are unable to continue seeing them as your friend because you got into an argument. Like you're unable to continue having a positive bond of like friendship because you had a disagreement, and now you can only see them as like your enemy or like someone who's out to get you, if that makes sense. So yeah, after hearing about this, you're probably wondering like, what does this have to do with object permanence or like forgetting about stuff? Like, how is this relating to ADHD? Well, yeah, same. So when I first had the idea for this video, originally it was for object permanence because I had heard about it before and I wanted to learn more about it. And so when I was doing my research I started doing research on object permanence, I came across an article that was talking about how object permanence isn't the right term to use because it technically isn't what ADHDers are struggling with. And they said that it's actually object constancy. And so I was like, oh, okay. So then I started looking into object constancy, and the more I looked into it, I'm like, this doesn't even make any sense. This is nothing compared to what this ADHDers are struggling with. I don't know who was the first person to say that it was object constancy instead of object permanence, but honestly, object constancy it's like further away from what ADHDers are struggling with than object permanence is. Object permanence, I can understand how someone misunderstood it, but object constancy, I don't understand how that came to be a thing. I don't understand that. Yeah, object constancy has nothing to do with objects anyways in the first place. It has to do with your relationships with other people. So the people who typically do struggle with object constancy are those with borderline personality disorder, so like BPD, or people who have narcissistic personality disorder, so NPD. Yeah, so those are the people who typically do struggle with object constancy, which makes sense. So unless you have BPD or NPD, you probably don't struggle with object constancy. But if you're hearing this and you're realizing that you do tend to struggle with like having like being able to maintain positive emotional bonds with people, and you tend to see people in a negative light if you have a little disagreement or like they do something that you don't like, and then yeah, maybe you should look into like borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. I don't know. Look into them a little bit more. Look into object constancy a little bit more to understand it better. Because, yeah, it's not extremely uncommon for people to struggle with object constancy as opposed to being struggling with object permanence. That's way more uncommon, I'm sure. But it's not super uncommon for people to struggle with object constancy, but it's not an ADHD related issue or struggle or whatever. So just to reiterate, if you forget about things that you're not seeing all the time, that it's definitely not a problem with object constancy. So if it's not object permanence issues, and if it's not object constancy issues, then what is the problem? What is it? Well, there's not really an official term for what ADHDers are struggling with, like, you know, forgetting the things that we don't see all the time. There's not really an official term for it because I think it's due to a combination of things, to be honest. But if you want to use a specific term or something, you can just say out of sight, out of mind. It makes the most sense, and most people will know what you mean when you say that. But if you don't really know what that means, here's a quick definition of the out of sight, out of mind problem, as I like to call it. So out of sight, out of mind is when you often forget about people or things that are not visible or like around you all the time. So what that can look like is forgetting to take your multivitamins because you know they're in your cupboard, and so because you don't see them you forget about it. Yeah, or like forgetting to call or message your friend who's moved to a new town or city because you're not seeing them all the time, so you kind of forget about them. So I would say the main reason this happens to ADHDers is because of memory problems. So the key word that we keep seeing is forget. It was the word that was put places where it didn't need to be put. When you forget things a lot, that typically means that you have a problem with memories. So I did some research on this and I found a really interesting article about ADHD and long-term memory. And so what the paper found was that ADHDers seem to encounter problems when it comes to encoding memories. So that means that when it comes to creating and storing memories, the ADHD brain is doing something very different from the neurotypical brain. So what ends up happening can be one of a few things. Either we don't create the memory at all, or we store some of it or all of it incorrectly. So when it comes time to actually retrieve that memory, like when we're trying to, remember what fruits we bought at the grocery store, we cannot retrieve it because it was either not created at all or it was just stored in the wrong place. And we're like, I don't know, I can't remember. And so when things are out of sight, it makes it even harder to retrieve that memory because we don't have anything to kind of trigger that memory or like cue the memory because we don't see anything. So yeah, we just don't know where things are. So that's where the whole out of sight, out of mind thing kind of comes from. Of course, there are lots of other things that can contribute to the whole out of sight, out of mind thing, like also just like with like being distracted and not being able and having like working memory issues, so like not being able to hold as many things in our heads as like a neurotypical person could. if that makes any sense. But yeah, there's that, there's distractibility, there's just being disorganized also has a part to play in the whole out of sight, out of mind problem. So yeah, there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot of things that contribute to it, but I think the main thing really is like memory. So yeah. So now we know that we're not struggling with object permanence, and if we are, we're going to see the doctor. We're not struggling with object constancy, and if we are, it has nothing to do with ADHD. We have an out of sight, out of mind problem, and it's most likely because of encoding memory issues. So how do we deal with this now? Well, the best tip that I have for you right now is to keep things visible. So that could be putting reminders on your phone to remind you of doing things, or keeping like important things, like maybe like your meds or your multivitamins or your keys, or I don't know, whatever important thing that you need on a daily basis, keeping it somewhere where you will see it every day to remind yourself of it. It could also be like, you know, having a visible to-do list, or like a visible calendar or a schedule or something that you will see every day. You know, you could even like take the doors off of your cabinets and cupboards if you want. If that works for your household, you could even do that so that you can always see what you have inside of your cupboards and stuff. Or another idea could be like taking pictures of what's inside your fridge, or having a list, like a whiteboard with like a list of all the stuff that's in your fridge, and then if something is out, you can just cross it off or whatever. But like, you know, a list or something where you can always see what you have without having to like rummage through your fridge or just like forget about things and then they go bad. Yeah, or you could just like put sticky notes up all over the place to help you remind yourself of stuff. I don't know. But if you think of something that will help you to remember things that you cannot see, then you should try it out. It might work for you. Basically, the main point here is to, if you have an out of sight, out of mind problem, the main point is to keep things in your sight, to keep things visible, because that will help you to remember the things that you keep forgetting about. So, yeah. So, with that being said, that is all that I have for this topic today. I hope that you understood everything that I said and explained, and I hope that you will find something that will help you to remember things better. That brings us to the end of this video. If you liked it and you learned something new, then please hit the like button so that it can spread to more people. If you have anything that you would like to say, if you have any tips on how to keep things more visible in your house, then please comment them down below. It'd be great to see what you guys have to say and any other tips that you can think of. Finally, if you enjoy watching my videos and if you like to learn more about things related to neurodiversity, then please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when I post my next video. So as always, stay Rachelistic, or whatever your name is, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye. And if you remembered this, thumbs up for you.